Good morning. You're watching Fair World Order. This is Jeff, and today is February 5th, 2021. So welcome to Friday. Hope you all woke up nice and early to watch WandaVision like I did. Can't wait to go back on YouTube and see all the, let me fix this real quick. It's early. It's early in the morning here. All right, so hopefully you got to watch WandaVision, or you will be later today. I will probably watch it a couple times today. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I wanted to start off the show by kind of talking about a process that I've learned over my years. And what got me thinking about this was a clip from Nomiki Konst. Yes, I saw it last night on her podcast. And basically, she was talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene as being low hanging fruit, as just somebody who's so off the rails and saying that it was pretty easy for the House of Representatives to actually take action against her, just because she's so off the rails. And Omiki went on to describe just the country right now is just living in a land of lies and bullshit, as she said, and she's absolutely right. And I want to. Got me kind of thinking as I was driving around last night, and going back to some stuff I discussed on the February 2nd broadcast. So that debate between Noam Chomsky and Michel Foucault, when Noam Chomsky was talking about trying to envision our model society, and then taking steps towards working towards that model society. It got me thinking about something that I've learned in my years in the Army, and that is it's using land navigation as a model for figuring out how to get to an objective. So what I want you to do right now is just imagine you get dropped off somewhere, inside a strange city, out in the mountain somewhere, but you get dropped off somewhere and you don't know where you are. But you're told you have to make it to somewhere, back to your house, to a restaurant or something. What would the steps be you would take in order to figure out how to get to where you're going? Well, there's really three steps, and most people, when I present this problem to, most people forget step one. And step one is you have to figure out where you are. Before you can figure out how to get to where you're going, you have to know where you are first. Then you can figure out where you're going and then the best way to get there. So what I want to do right now is just kind of start the discussion of where we are right now as a country, so that we can start thinking about what would need to be done, when we imagine what our model society would look like, how we would get there. And I want to go back to Nomiki's comments about the lies and the BS. This isn't an exhaustive conversation about where we are, but there's one aspect I want to talk about, and that is we really do seem to be living in a country where people, as Nomiki said, we don't agree on reality. Decades of what I believe is intentional miseducating people has led to people without critical thinking skills, without schools of basic logic and rhetoric, and just incapable of really discerning BS from reality, to put it that simply. We have something that, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I described the CNN or the neutrality bias, where modern media companies, particularly the 24-hour news companies, think that fair and balanced coverage, think that objective journalism is presenting both sides of an issue. If you have somebody on that's saying that the earth is round, you have to give equal time to somebody saying the earth is flat. And this is just absolutely ridiculous. We've allowed people to present ideas without any substantiation to those ideas or claims. And that has so eroded the public's ability to just have a concept of what's going on outside of their little existence. For most of us, we don't live in Washington, D.C. We don't live in New York. We don't live in Los Angeles. we're not, breaking bread with politicians, with CEOs. We rely on our media sources to give us information about the world. We rely on our scientists, rely on our educators to present us information about the world. And we're at a point now where there's so much misinformation that most of us can't really grasp what's real or what's not. And because of our education system focusing so much on performance rather than process, outcome rather than process, standardized test scores rather than critical thinking, a significant number of our population just does not have the skills needed to evaluate information. And later on, I'm going to do inside the echo chamber segment where I'm going to kind of show an example of this. But the biggest thing is, I watched Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments on the House floor yesterday, and as obnoxious as what she's saying is, she, in many ways, is a victim of the society that we're in right now. She is just not. I can't tell if she's an honest agent or acting in bad faith. I don't know if she truly believes all the nonsense she's saying or has said in the past. But I'm honestly tended to think that she actually believes, or at least at one point believed, the QAnon conspiracies and the Sandy Hook conspiracies. And depending on what echo chamber you live in, what media environment you live in, you may have no external reference to challenge the narratives that you're being presented. You may not, and because of our education system, you may have never been given the critical thinking skills needed to challenge the narratives that you're being presented. So one of the things I'm going to be doing in this show is just trying to really look and break down why I believe the things I do and how I evaluate information as it comes to me. I think most people that know me will recognize that I'm a pretty skeptical and even to the point of cynical person. And even that perspective sometimes can be, not sometimes, oftentimes that perspective is flawed. But I'm always challenging my assumptions and my beliefs, and I think everybody should engage in that because it makes your own beliefs stronger. And last thing on this segment, when I was in high school, I was known for ditching class a lot. But unlike most people that ditch class, I usually would ditch class just to go to the library and read. And one of the books, or a series of books that I was always reading, was called The Opposing Viewpoints. And on the back cover and inside the flap of all the Opposing Viewpoints books was an anonymous quote. In order to understand your own arguments, you have to understand those of your opponents. So I think it's important to challenge your own assumptions, challenge your own beliefs, and really deploy critical thinking skills in evaluating all of the information that's being presented to you. Because right now we have, across the ideological spectrum, politicians people on the left, people on the right, Democrats, Republicans, socialists, communists, libertarians, Christians, atheists, scientists, non-believers, anti-vaxxers. So many people are just not properly evaluating the information that they're receiving, and they're regurgitating it out. So on that note, I'm gonna skip ahead to. We're going to go ahead and move on to world news. All right, here's a couple updates from stories I covered earlier in the week. So after @Rihanna tweeted, "Why aren't we talking about this?" #FarmersProtest, with a link to a CNN article discussing the internet being cut out in the area of New Delhi. Indian government officials and pro-government celebrities were quick to criticize the music star Rihanna. Home Minister Anit Shah tweeted, "No propaganda can deter India's unity. No propaganda can stop India to attain new heights. Propaganda cannot decide India's fate, only progress can. India stands united and together to achieve progress." Others were less sophisticated in their defense of the government, with one person referring to Rihanna as a porn star and others praising her ex-boyfriend Chris Brown for assaulting her. Hundreds of thousands of farmers have been protesting throughout India for several months in response to 3 laws passed in September, which they believe will cut out small farmers in favor of large-scale farming corporations. Early this week, the Indian government cut off all mobile internet in response to a hunger strike amongst the farmers around New Delhi. Police in New Delhi announced they were opening an investigation into whether there was an international campaign to harm the nation's reputation following Rihanna's tweet and a tweet by environmental activist Greta Thunberg. Resistance to the military coup continues to grow in Myanmar as protesters rallied throughout the nation. Students and teachers in Yangon held up three-finger salutes and chanted, "Long live Mother Sue." The military in Myanmar has been arresting protesters and cut off Facebook in the country. The protests are in response to the military taking control of the country early this week after disputing the validity of the November elections. The military announced a 1-year period of control throughout the country. So both these stories in Myanmar, the coup in Myanmar, and the farmers' protests in India, I covered earlier this week. These are going to be ongoing stories for some time, but I do want to take a moment to highlight some similarities in these stories. So in both of these stories, what you have is an established authority reacting to common people trying to take back some power. So in India, in India you have a system of farming where local small scale farmers, usually with like an acre, 1 to 2 acres of land, are able to compete on the open market because of certain price control guarantees by the government. The 3 laws that were passed in September took away some of those price controls and made it possible for, presumably under the guise of freedom, to allow farmers to sell to any market. But what that really did was threaten the small scale farmers by allowing corporations to compete with them. And when corporations are allowed to compete with small scale farmers, corporations can withstand short-term losses, so they end up, like we've seen in the United States, large scale farming will, on a level playing field, will end up monopolizing the farming community. The farmers recognize this, so they immediately started protesting these laws and have been doing so since September. So a couple common refrains in here is the Indian government blaming an international conspiracy for ruining their reputation. So this is an example of scapegoating that we typically see, and I'm not trying to equate India with a fascist government, but these are things you see in a fascist government where you create an external threat so that you can clamp down on internal opposition. You see shutting off access to media. In India, it was shutting off mobile internet around New Delhi. In Myanmar, it was shutting off Facebook. Creating external threat, and it's a lot of similarities in these stories. Yeah, and what's really scary is you see, for us as Americans, when we look at what's going on in other countries, we can start seeing parallels to what's going on in our own country. So following the insurrection at the United States Capitol on January 6th, there have been continued calls for increased domestic terrorism laws. I fail to see this distinction between these domestic terrorism laws and what's going on in these other countries. Part of having free speech, part of having freedom of assembly is allowing people we don't agree with to have speech and freedom of assembly. That's not to mean that insurrections can be tolerated, but we have laws to deal with insurrection and treason. We do not need additional surveillance by the government. If we allow additional surveillance by the government, we will create situations like in India, Myanmar, and in our own country in numerous times, where the government will end up curtailing the people's freedoms. and the people's ability to be equal actors within the economy. So when I the biggest reason I cover these world stories isn't just to make people aware of what's going on throughout the world, although that's part of it. The biggest reason is so that people can better recognize what's going on within our own country. This isn't just sympathy for Indian farmers; it's for recognizing through Indian farmers what's happening to our own farmers and our own labor unions. All right, so that was the world news. All right, so today's GoFundMe campaign. Let me cut over to. All right, so today's GoFundMe campaign is going to be for Brian Page. Back in November, Brian, age 17, was paralyzed from the chest down during a hockey game. So he has significant medical expenses. Right now, they've only raised about 20% of what they were asking for. Although if you look in the notes, they're pretty close to their initial request, but continued medical bills have caused them to go up to $1.5 million. So this is a young man in Philadelphia who is currently paralyzed from the chest down. So his father is a Delaware State Trooper. His mother was there at the scene when he was injured. So the link for this campaign is in the description below. Please take a moment to go support this young man if you're able to, or at least share the link if you're able to. And I will go ahead and do my donation now. And again, I don't do these aren't huge donations I'm doing every day, but I just think it's important to turn speech into action. So I will continue to try to support these movements to the best of my ability. And with that being said, let's move on to the next segment. All right, inside the echo chamber. So I initially was planning on doing a segment on, let's see, where was it? I was initially planning on doing a segment about censored news, but reading this article, there's a couple words that caught my attention, so I actually wanted to talk about the echo chamber and what I was talking about earlier about critical thinking. So this is an article from Project Censored that was originally in Citizen Truth. And it's a story about how charter schools throughout the country are hijacking money from the CARES Relief Act intended for small businesses. And the author of this article, Jeff Bryant, is stating that money that was supposed to go to minority communities is being hijacked by charter schools. And I don't know if there's any veracity in what he's saying. It's quite possible that everything Jeff Bryant is saying is truthful, 100% truthful. But the use of that term hijack really caught my attention, and it goes back to employing critical thinking skills as we evaluate information. Using the word hijack in the headline and throughout the article tells me that whether intentionally or not, Mr. Bryant is employing a call to emotion. Rather than just presenting the information, he's using loaded terms to steer his audience into an outcome that he intended. I don't know how much of this. I don't know how much of the veracity of this article or not. I don't know if this money really was intended for minority communities, or how the charter schools are hijacking money. But like I said, I was initially intended to cover this story as just a legitimate story. but the loaded emotional term of hijacking caused me to be a little bit cautious. So when you're reading the news, when you're reading stuff, I just caution everybody to be cognizant of the type of language that's being used. Is somebody presenting an argument with premises and a conclusion derived from that argument, from those premises? Or is somebody using some sort of fallacious argument, in this case, an appeal to emotion? And just understand what these different fallacious arguments are, understand how people can use words or selective facts to mislead you, to steer you in a particular direction, and just try to be cognizant of that. I'm seeing this, I'm gonna be a little more cautious about anything from Project Censored, and it doesn't mean I'm not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it is good seeing that they're just linking to external sources. I don't know what kind of process Project Censored uses to vet these external articles, or if they just see things that look interesting and they post it. So I'm going to be a little more cautious going forward, and I encourage all of you, as you're reading sources, always consider what the agenda of the author is. I try to be pretty upfront with what I'm doing here. I'm not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes, at least not trying to. But that doesn't mean other people are. So always exercise caution and those critical thinking skills. And moving right along. All right, deep in the red. So let's take a look at some news from some more conservative areas of the country, not necessarily where I live, but where things are happening. All right, so West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey announced Thursday that a settlement had been reached between the state and the management consulting firm McKinsey & Company. McKinsey & Company settled for $10 million and no admission of wrongdoing after West Virginia sued the company for continuing to help Purdue Pharmaceuticals sell OxyContin, despite Purdue already admitting to misbranding the drug. Mango County and the town of Kermit have also filed federal lawsuits against McKinsey on similar grounds. Also in West Virginia, residents will be able to register for medical marijuana next Wednesday as dispensaries continue to organize for opening. Medical marijuana was passed in the state back in 2017, but has seen its implementation delayed. Here in Arizona, we actually just passed full legalization of marijuana, even for recreational use. That was passed in November, went into effect, I think, last week. And dispensaries all over the state lines are like 100 people long as people try to get that good recreational marijuana. All right, so moving on. In Alabama, the House Judiciary Committee passed 8 bills aimed at reforming the state's prison system following a lawsuit filed from the United States Department of Justice. One bill that would not pass is a repeal of a 1977 mandatory minimum sentencing law. Critics of the repeal stated that it would curtail maximum sentences, while the author of the repeal, Representative Christopher England, said that argument was a red herring, as there are already sentencing guidelines in place for heinous crimes. The DOJ sued Alabama in December after finding within the state excessive violence from both inmates and correctional officers in the state's prisons. All right, so this is going to be kind of a short show today, going into Friday. Hope you all enjoy your weekend. I will be back on Monday, and we're going to go ahead and go to the last word. Today is going to be, and it's going to be every Friday. It's going to be a little fun. Give you a nice little moment going into your weekend. So enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you on Monday.